Pravina, and I work here at Seacliff State Beach, and today we're going to be learning all about marine invertebrates and what types of adaptations they use to live in their really rough habitat. So I know that was a mouthful, really long words in there. We're going to break each word down. So marine invertebrate. Marine, you can think of the word ocean. So something that lives in the ocean. Now, invertebrates are animals that have no vertebrae or no backbone. So if you look at your back, you've got a backbone there, right? Check it out. These animals have no backbone. So if you look behind me, you can see that we have some fish diagrams. These are vertebrates, so they do have a backbone. So they're not included in what we're going to be talking about today. But if you see peeking through the hole over here, we've got our little octopus friend, and he is a marine invertebrate because he has no backbone. And that helps him fit through really, really small holes. So marine invertebrates, animals that live in the ocean without a backbone. And this includes a lot of animals like sea stars, sea urchins, sea anemones, crabs, and a whole lot of animals. And we're going to be looking at some today. So these marine invertebrates, the ones that we're going to be talking about, live in a very specific habitat known as tide pools. Now, what are tide pools? Tide pools are areas where there's water right next to the ocean, and sometimes they're completely submerged or completely underwater. So the tide has come up and is pretty high and has submerged these pools. So they're just in the ocean. But when there's a low tide, so the tide has gone out, the waves are pushed back, these pools are kind of just left out and exposed to air. So it's just like a little pool of water, usually in some rocks, or like if you have a beach with a rocky shore, you can find tide pools there. And this is a really, really harsh habitat for animals. So the word habitat means it's a place where animals live. It's like their home. So for example, you wouldn't find a mountain lion on the beach here because it's not part of its habitat, right? You're gonna go find a mountain lion in the mountain. The mountain is its habitat. So this habitat is a really harsh environment because sometimes it's exposed to air, so the animals that live in it need to be able to live in the air, but sometimes it's completely underwater, so these animals need to be able to survive underwater as well. Now, not a lot of animals can do this, right? So a lot of the ones that can are marine invertebrates. Those are the ones we're talking about. Now, how do these marine invertebrates survive in this type of environment? Well, they have a lot of things known as adaptations. Now, everyone and everything pretty much has adaptations that's living. So we can think about, let's say, a seal, a harbor seal swimming in the ocean. One adaptation that animal has is that it has really thick layer of fat known as blubber, and this helps keep it warm, so that way they can survive in our really cold Monterey Bay waters. What other animals have adaptations? Maybe a sea urchin. We're going to talk about this later. They have those really pointy spines. You can think about what type or why this adaptation might help it survive. So adaptations are characteristics or traits that help an animal survive in its environment. And it might help it stay protected from predators, or maybe it helps it catch prey, or maybe it helps it stay protected from the environment itself. And we're going to be looking at some of those today. So I want everyone to put their imagination caps on. You got it on? I think I'm missing mine. Whoop. Got it. So let's have our imagination caps on and pretend that we are a type of marine invertebrate that lives in a tide pool. So I'm going to be a sea urchin, and I have lots of purple spines coming out all around me. Can you imagine? Can you see them? I've got a lot. So we're going to dive on in and take a look at our tide pool, animals that we have in our tank here, and think about what types of adaptations they have. So let's go ahead and turn you guys around. Here's our aquarium at Seacliff State Beach Visitor Center. You are all welcome to come check it out when we have reopened. We've got lots of red algae in here. Now, red algae is a part of these animals that live in an intertidal zone or a tide pool. It's part of their habitat. And maybe you can think about reasons why this algae helps these animals live in their habitat. We've also got a really large, giant green anemone here. We've got some other anemones. We got one right here. These are sunburst anemones that we're looking at right now. Where's the other one? Here he is. There's the other one. And we've got some really small anemones. These are strawberry anemones. We've also got sea urchins. Lots of sea stars. Here you can see two. These are bat stars. And let's see. We've also got little hermit crab that likes to hide in the algae a lot. So maybe you've taken some thoughts about what types of adaptations these animals have that help them live in an environment that can be exposed to air and underwater. As you can see, they're all underwater right now, and they all need water to survive. So what do they do when they're exposed to air? Let's take a closer look at the giant green anemone. So this large anemone, you may notice that it has a lot of tentacles. Can you think of why these tentacles might help it survive? What do these tentacles do for the anemone? Well, they do two major things. Number one, they help the anemone catch prey. So if you're a little fish or a little snail crawling around, an anemone's tentacles kind of latch onto you, they might sting you and they can paralyze you, and then it will start to feed on that prey. So that's one adaptation that this anemone has. And how it stings is that it actually has these little harpoon-like features inside of its tentacles, and these harpoons shoot out when they feel some prey or even a predator. So that's the second major thing that these tentacles do for the anemone, is that they help it protect itself from predators. So if you're a really hungry fish and you wanted to snack on some anemone, its tentacles might keep you away by stinging you, because that wouldn't feel really good, would it? So that's one adaptation that this anemone has, is that it has these tentacles with stinging cells that protect it and help it find food. You can see in the middle of the anemone, right there, that is its mouth. It's also where it releases its waste. So it has one hole. Another adaptation that this anemone has is that it can attach these shell fragments and these little rocks to the outside of its body. And if you're looking at anemones in a tide pool outside, you might see that there's even more shell fragments attached to this anemone. And this helps protect it from heat so that the anemone doesn't dry out when it's exposed to air. And when the tide is low and the anemone is exposed to air, it also curls up and gets really tight so that there's less area that's exposed to the air and the sun and the heat. So also attaching these rocks and shell fragments allow it to protect its body, kind of like sunscreen. And my favorite adaptation that anemones have, not all anemones, but some anemones, here, get the glare out, is that they have this symbiotic algae that lives inside of them. So this is an algae that helps the anemone live, and the anemone helps the algae live. So you can see that it's a little bit green, and that is the algae that's living inside of its body. And this algae is kind of like a little plant. This little plant that lives inside of the body photosynthesizes. Just like how our trees and grass photosynthesize and we get oxygen, this anemone gets oxygen from algae, and it also gets energy, like food. That is a really cool adaptation. So this anemone helps algae survive, and the algae helps the anemone survive. And in the wild, you see that these anemones can get an even darker green color. So that's the giant green anemone. Now let's look at the other two anemones that have the similar adaptations. This is the sunburst anemone. We have two of them, and they both have similar adaptations. You can see they've both got a greenish tint. And they'll also attach shell fragments to their body. Now our third type of anemone in the tank is this strawberry anemone. And they are generally pretty small. Is there anything good about being small in a tide pool? There is. It helps them stay hidden from predators because they're a lot smaller. And you can see that they also live in groups, these little clusters of strawberry anemones. So imagine you're a really hungry fish or a sea slug, and you're hungry for an anemone. You can eat maybe one or two of these little strawberry anemones, but then you can't eat all of them because you get too full. So that helps the other ones survive in this type of environment. Now let's go on to our next animal. Let's do our sea urchin. So what types of adaptations does the sea urchin have? Like I said earlier, I have really long, pointy spines. Can you think of why these purple spines might help protect the sea urchin or help them survive in their environment?
We're getting
It keeps them.
to say it's for protection.
Oh, very good. It is for protection. Spot on. So these spines do help the sea urchin stay protected. Imagine you were a really hungry sea otter and you saw a really large sea urchin at the bottom of the ocean. Now, would you rather eat the sea urchin if it had no spines or if it has spines? I would rather eat a sea urchin without spines because that would hurt a lot less, right? So these spines help protect the sea urchin from predators. But it also can help them stick to food. So let's say they're crawling along the floor of this tide pool and they go by some algae. This algae might get stuck on their spine, and they have these really long tube feet that stick out. We'll have a closer look in a second. And these tube feet will move that algae from the spines towards their mouth, and their mouth is on their underside. So let's try to see if we can get a closer look at these tube feet. Can you see that there? Ooh, is that a good view?
Yeah.
So you can see all of those little tube feet that are kind of swaying in the water current. And those help the sea urchin move around and also bring food to the bottom where its mouth is. So you can also see its mouth. Do you see those like white 5 tooth-like plates coming out of the middle of the sea urchin? It's right above the algae that's floating there. Those are its teeth. And that mouthpiece is actually called Aristotle's lantern. So let's go take a closer look at that. We've just cleaned off this sea urchin. And here we can have a look at its shell. So not only does it have spines to help protect it, but it also has this hard shell that helps protect the insides. And it has this cool mouthpiece called the Aristotle's lantern. Now this Aristotle's lantern, this comes out of the bottom of this sea urchin. So that's it out of the bottom. This is Aristotle's lantern, the mouthpiece, and it comes out. And you can see that those kind of tooth-like plates that we were just looking at on the live urchin. Now, this mouthpiece does not only help the sea urchin eat food, like kelp and seaweed, but it also helps it dig holes in rocks. Imagine being strong enough to do that. So if you're out tide pooling, you may see some sea urchins that live in little holes in rocks. And the sea urchin has actually dug this hole out itself, and it stays in there for protection as well. So when it's hungry, it'll crawl out to feed. And then when it wants to go rest, it goes back into its hole because this hole helps keep it protected from predators. And sometimes the sea urchins might grow a little too big and their spines get stuck in that hole, but that's okay because they can still feed on whatever algae or kelp floats above them. So if it comes close, they can latch on with their 2 feet and still continue to eat while living in the hole. Now, if you were a predator of sea urchins, like some fish are, but also sea otters, my favorite fact about sea otters is that their bones can actually turn a purplish color in their teeth when they eat a lot of sea urchins. Would you want to have purple teeth and bones? I think that'd be kind of cool. So we're going to go on to our next animal, which is our little hermit crab here. Let's see if we can get a better view of it. Here we go. So that's our hermit crab. You can see that it's got the 2 eyes coming out of the top of its head. Now, why might it be important for an animal to have eyes coming from the top of its head instead of always looking down? Well, their predators come from above. So if this hermit crab lives on the floor of the tide pool, it doesn't really need to look down because most of its predators are coming from above it. So imagine if you're a hungry bird and you're flying above a tide pool and you're looking down for some hermit crabs. Well, this hermit crab can look right back at you. And this, if a predator starts to threaten it, it can just hide back in its shell. And I just gave up the next adaptation, which is that big shell it has. So it actually gets its shells from snails. So sometimes when sea snails die, they leave their shell behind, and hermit crabs will actually go fill them. So they have a really soft body under that shell, and they use the shell for protection. It would be really hard to bite through that shell, wouldn't it, if you were a bird? Another adaptation that crabs have, or hermit crabs, is that they have 10 feet. So they're what is known as decapods, and deca means 10 and pods mean feet. So they have 10 feet. They've got 2 that live in the shell and help it stay attached to the shell. And they've got the other 8 coming out the front. So they help them walk, and they also help them feed. And they also help them stay protected from predators. So you see those big pincher claws in the front? You might even recognize them from other crabs you've seen. Those pinchers help them stay protected from predators, but could also help them grab onto their food. You can see that there's also some algae growing off the back of that hermit crab right there. Where is it? There we go, right here. That algae helps it stay camouflaged. And camouflage is a really great adaptation for a lot of animals to have in the tide pool. And camouflage, does anybody know what that means? Camouflage can help them stay hidden by altering their coloration or their texture to make them look more like their surroundings so that it's harder for predators to see them. Oh, look, he's crawling towards us. You can see those long antennae on the front. Those help it feel around. What a great adaptation. Let's see if we can get even closer. Is it a bit blurry? Yeah, so that's our hermit crab. Now we're gonna go on to our final animal. And that is the bat star. So as you see here, this is the bat star, and they generally come in a range of colors like red, orange, yellow, green, and purple. If you look very closely, maybe it might be easier to see on this darker purple one, you can see a fuzziness around the outside of this sea star. And this fuzziness is kind of like their gills. So those are little organs that help them exchange oxygen in the water. So they can grab the oxygen from the water and it goes through their tissue and it helps them breathe. Kind of like how gills are in a fish. So if these sea stars need water to breathe, what happens when the tide is really low and they're exposed to air? Well, they can actually latch on really tightly to the rock. So if you see all those little tube feet coming out of the bottom of the arms, let's see if we can get a better look over here. Those little tube feet, those are similar to the sea urchin, and they also latch on really tightly to the rock, and this helps them keep in moisture. So that way they can wait through the tide. So when they wait for the tide to come back up and for them to be underwater, and then they can continue to move around. But when it's dry and they're exposed to the air, they have to hold on really tightly so that they can keep all of their moisture inside of them. Maybe some of you know that if a sea star loses its arm, it can actually regrow. And that's a great adaptation because it allows them to survive even longer. So if a hungry fish came along and ate one of the arms of a sea star, it can actually regrow and come back to normal. A really, really cool thing about sea stars is how they feed on their food. So how sea stars eat is that they actually have two stomachs. So not like how we have a stomach and then a dessert stomach, but they have two separate stomachs. One that actually comes out. So how they feed is that they go to where their food is, they hover over it or they crawl over it. They release one of their stomachs. So their stomachs leaves their body, goes around their food. Let's say they're trying to eat a mussel. And it goes around the mussel, and then the stomach starts to digest the mussel outside of the body. And once it's partially digested, it'll come and bring that food back inside the body to the other stomach. How cool is that? I don't know if that'd be a good way to eat at the dinner table, though. So now that we've looked at all of our animals in the tank, here we also have two sea stars back there. Those are ochre stars. So the ones that we have up front here, pink colored ones, these are bat stars. And they're ones, if you can see them all the way in the back on the black filter, right here, those are ochre stars, and they're a different type of sea star. So now that we've gone through and looked at all of our adaptations, let's take a quick look at what might help them in their habitat too. So this red algae, maybe it doesn't look very interesting because it's not moving or anything, but they make a really great habitat for animals. So imagine you're a predator looking for some prey. If you're looking for sea urchin to eat, would it be harder or easier to find them if they were in this algae? It would be a lot harder because they might be hidden in the algae and blending in. And if you're a predator looking for a sea star that was kind of like out in the open like this, it'd be so easy to find. So blending in with their habitat is a great adaptation. Now that we've taken a look at all of our animals, we're gonna go ahead and make our own little tide pool. Let's put that back in there. Hi again. So we're gonna learn how to make our own tide pool at home. So all you're gonna need are 2 pieces of like printing paper. This is just a plain white piece of paper. 2 pieces of that. Crayons or something to color with, like markers, color pencils. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna draw like an ovalist shape. I've got some gray crayon on here, but you're gonna draw like a kind of an ovalish, wonky shape, and this is gonna represent your tide pool. So you're gonna put 2 pieces of paper together, and then you're gonna cut around that shape that you drew, and you're gonna get something that looks like this. So 2 sheets of this. And then you're gonna take one of the sheets, and you're actually gonna cut another hole out of it. This is what I've done here. I've just cut another wonky oval out of it. It doesn't have to be perfect because tide pools aren't perfect. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna have this one be the bottom of your tide pool, and this is just gonna be like a rocky shore around it. And what I've done is I've colored this outer oval gray to mimic the rock. And then I've just drawn in some little mussels here, because sometimes mussels like to live in the drier area of the rock. They still get splashed by water, but it's a bit drier. And then you can draw even more animals that you can find in the water that like to stay in the water on your other sheet of paper. So this is gonna be like the inside of the tide pool that stays pretty wet most of the time, but can sometimes be exposed to air. And then this one's gonna go right on top. So I've drawn a few animals. And this is what it should look like. And I'm gonna just color in around the outside. I color it blue, and I'm gonna color in my animals. So if you wanna go ahead and get 2 sheets of paper and do the same, go ahead. I guess we have some time for some questions as well during this craft.
We do, in fact, have quite a few questions in here.
All right, let me see if I can turn my volume up. Whoops. Sorry about that. Okay.
Our first question from Cece is, what do starfish eat? What's their favorite food?
That's a great question. So sea stars will eat a lot of things, basically whatever they can catch too, because they're pretty slow. So sometimes they'll feed on decomposing matter on the bottom. So like any kelp or algae that's falling to the bottom, they can just feed on that. But here at Seacliff, we feed our sea stars scallops. So they're pretty fancy sea stars. And they also like to eat like mussels and really whatever's left over on the floor that they can get to.
Awesome. We also have some questions about invertebrates. Are there any land invertebrates?
Great question. So one of my favorite marine invertebrates is actually, it's my absolute favorite animal ever, are sea slugs. And they're little nudibranchs. So they are like little slugs and they have their gills coming out. And these are kind of related to slugs on land. And those are also invertebrates. So there's land slugs, land snails, and you go ahead and think of what other invertebrates there might be.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Jennifer is wondering what your favorite sea creature is.
Well, I've just exposed that. That is the sea slug. And I'm aware that a lot of you might not know what that is. So I'm going to flip you around and have like a quick look at a painting of one.
Oh, fantastic.
So this is my favorite animal in the whole entire world, are nudibranchs, also called sea slugs. And they're really beautiful, and they can be all different types of colors. And some will even feed on sea anemones and take their stinging cells and they can put it in their own body. And other nudibranchs can also eat seaweed and take in the photosynthesizing cells, so the cells that help them get energy from sunlight. So these are like solar-powered nudibranchs or sea slugs because they take in sunlight and they get energy that way, just like plants, but they're slugs.
Wow, that's really cool. I've got a couple questions here about anemones. So, do starfish get stung by anemones sometimes?
You know, sometimes they might, and an anemone might want to feed on a sea star.
And what happens if trash gets into an anemone?
Ooh, very good question. You know, I'm sure it wouldn't like it very much, but there have been studies showing that coral, which are very similar and related to sea anemones, have actually been eating little tiny bits of plastic in the ocean. So maybe there's a similarity with sea anemones.
Awesome. So they have, in the comments, there's been a lot of talk about sea stars versus starfish. Do you know if there's such thing as a starfish, and does it swim, or is it just a sea star?
I just use the term sea star because they're not technically fish.
Gotcha.
Fish have a backbone. They're vertebrates, and sea stars are not vertebrates. They're invertebrates. So they're not fish, they're just sea stars.
Ranger Pravina, do you know what might eat an anemone? Are there any predators for an anemone?
Ooh, so one predator are actually sea slugs, my favorite animal. Like I said earlier, they'll eat the tips of the tentacles and take into the stinging cells. So sea slugs might try to feed on anemones. Other predators, that's a good question. I'll have to think about that.
So Madeline here is asking, what does symbiotic mean?
Oh, great question. So symbiotic is when one animal has a relation with another animal, like a relationship, kind of like friends, and they work together to both survive. So there is a symbiotic relationship in the ocean between a shrimp and a fish, and that shrimp actually helps keep a lookout for the fish while the fish digs out a hole, and that's a symbiotic relationship because they can both live in the hole and stay protected, and the shrimp helps the fish stay away from predators, and then the fish helps it get a home.
Very cool. We have some questions about the strawberry anemone.
Uh-huh.
Is that a full-size strawberry anemone, or do they get bigger, or is that one small? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's like the general size. They do tend to stay pretty small in the wild, and they will also grow in like little clusters, and a lot of them can be related to each other. So they might come from the same individual and have started popping up around.
Yeah. So on the purple sea urchin, when you showed us that, I don't want to give away the answer, but when you showed us that thing that wasn't in the tank, was that a bone?
Okay, so the shell, and we also have the mouthpiece. It's made out of calcium carbonate. So it's similar to like a bone. It's like their teeth, like our teeth.
Nice, very cool. And I've got a couple more questions here, and then if you want to hop back on that craft, we'll have some flexibility in there. Is
Okay.
anyone at home doing that craft? Feel free to raise your hand or give us a thumbs up. Oh, it looks like we have some folks that are in fact doing the craft at home. That is fantastic.
You're bringing the ocean to your home.
We have some other questions coming in here about hermit crabs. How long do hermit crabs live? A long time, a kind of long time, or a very short time?
I would say, I'm not sure. I can't answer that. I don't know.
That's okay. What's wrong with that?
That's a great question.
Let's see. As we continue down the question line, I have 227 questions in here, so you guys have to work with me.
Great question.
As
Good
I find
thinking.
the best questions. Do you know by any chance why the purple sea urchin is purple? Does that help them with camouflage?
It could help them with camouflage because we looked at the red algae earlier, and that purple would really help them camouflage pretty well in that red algae. Imagine if your sea urchin was a bright yellow or bright pink, it might stand out within the algae. And the purple can also be from what the sea urchin is feeding on. But when these sea urchin are actually really young and tiny, they're a bit of a greenish color.
Fantastic. Do you know about how many sea animals are in the aquarium you have there?
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 7 species of animals, so 7 different types of animals. And I'm not sure how many, but we can give them a count. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3 big bat stars, 2 ochre stars, so that's 5. And we've got 2 urchins in there, 7. We've got 1, 2, 3 anemones that I can count, and a bunch of little strawberry anemones that I can't really get to, and then a hermit crab. I've already lost count. I hope someone out there was adding those up.
Yes, we have folks keeping track over here for sure. And we have time for about one more question. And that's going to be from Sandra Nelson. And she wants to know, do you have a favorite fish?
Favorite fish. So my favorite fish actually lives in tropical environments, in maybe more around the Southeast Asia region, and that is the frogfish. And they are really, really cool. They like to live on rocks and like kind of towards the bottom of the ocean floor. And they can have like anglerfish have like a little long extremity right here that kind of flicks around and looks like a little piece of food for prey for it to eat. So that little, it's kind of like a lure or like a bait that a fisherman would use. It kind of looks like that. And that attracts prey, like other smaller fish, and then the fish will come out, the frogfish will come out and eat it.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, that's very cool. Is that something that viewers can Google at home?
Yes, please go ahead and Google frogfish, Google tide pools, Google sea slug, my favorite animal ever. All really great animals and cool things to look up, especially when you're at home making your own tide pool.
Oh, Ranger Pravina, let's take a look at your tide pool.
I've colored in a few. You can even draw things underneath where the rock is to kind of show where it would live in an actual tide pool. So go ahead and Google where these animals might live. So I've drawn some sea slugs. This one's a little hard to see, but here's like a little Monterey dorad, or like a sea lemon. That's what you can call some sea slugs that is yellowish color. I've drawn some algae on a rock to mimic its habitat, and a little sea anemone. Yeah, and the sea urchin. Ooh. And after you're done with these two sheets, you can go ahead and if you've got a glue stick, glue together this top layer to the bottom. And I would also want to color around here like a bluish color to mimic the water.
Very cool. And so if anybody wants to show you their craft, can they send you a picture on Facebook to the
Yes.
Facebook?
Please send it to Seacliff State Beach.
Awesome. And you guys are also welcome to send it to the Ports program. And we are at Ports program, P-O-R-T-S program. And we just wanted to take a minute to thank everybody. Today we had an excellent program from Seacliff State Beach, and we appreciate you tuning in for our home learning program. And we have more of these to come. So right now we are operating the home learning program every hour on the hour, Monday through Friday, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And there's a couple different grade levels that you can tune into, but we have many, many 3rd to 5th grade programs. You can see Calaveras Big Trees where I'm at. You can see the Año Nuevo elephant seals. You can see this tide pool program and many others similar to that. So I'm going to add in the chat here the link for you guys to check out any more of these programs, and feel free to tune in for additional programs, and we just appreciate you all being here. And thank you all. You guys have a great day. See you later.